project would take us, 6 weeks to do from design to dev through our 4 steps. And we're putting all these hours in, and I noticed, and I was like, man, we're not accurately making what we should based on what we were putting into it. It was a very frustrating feeling that I got in the pit of my stomach. That's when I actually sat down with you. We went and had our, we did coffee. I can't remember the location. And I sat down with another mentor of mine who's an older, he's not in tech, finance business company, and he said, look man, let's walk through these steps. Let's talk about what you're doing. How many hours are you investing in each step? So we did really like a time graph of what I was putting into it and my development team, and we saw that I was way off.
So once it got down to the numbers,
yeah,
then you were really able to see that they're measured.
And I tracked down to every project we do down to the number of hours it takes from start to finish, what we build for, and I know the hourly rate that we make.
All right. Albert, I see you got something to say down there.
Good gosh. I wish I would have been able to have that kind of look towards what our P&L statement would have been 8 years ago when we started. It took us 7 years to build our technology in-house and own 100% of it, also for the market to catch up. But what we were always intentionally looking at was disrupting the local affiliate news market. So we just kind of waited back in stealth mode. Like, we didn't have actually a logo on our website. People would land on our site and we would track to make sure that the bounce rate would stay as high as 95%, so that no one would ever think that this would be a threat. And then once we became a threat about 1.5 years ago, we took off with our revenue, pushing towards being able to go directly to small businesses on the street and making sure that our technology and our margins on how we serve our advertisements was beyond what anybody else in the market was doing. We had an interesting conversation. Me and Thomas walking towards the train, and he kind of saw a long-term view of where we're going with what our company is. Sometimes you have to stay in stealth long enough to build your products and compete. Like maybe you're disrupting something like Groupon, disrupting the whole local market. But once that time comes, you have to then really just put the, your foot to the ground, pedal to the metal, and say, how are we going to make money? And so, like right now, we're averaging about 80% margins on every dollar in the company. But our numbers can go even higher.
I want to make sure I point something out in terms of qualifying your chief aims around your finances. Albert has had a successful exit, right? So he's got a little bit of something in the bank, and he can afford to have that amount of time where he was, playing the field, waiting to see what was going to happen with the market and release his product at the right time. If he didn't have that financial stability, perhaps his strategy would have been different. And that's what I want to point out is you got to make sure that your strategy starting out matches exactly where your money is now. Certain businesses, maybe it's just not that business for you at that time. If your if what's in your bank account doesn't match, it's really important to think that through. I just want to reel all this stuff back down to the basics. So Charles, if you'll speak on that.
So the first thing that came to my mind when you mentioned the idea, qualifying the idea, was margin, which he mentioned. So for me, I take it from a really basic approach. The first thing that I thought about was, were my personal basic needs. Did I have an idea that could sustain me long enough to build a business which started with my personal needs? And my story is a little bit different because, as of this year, I've been in the insurance industry for 20 years. I'm 37. So I started as a teenager, and I worked at really large corporations, from Blue Cross to CNA to MetLife. And I started in the mailroom, and I worked my way up. So I got a chance to see corporations in different departments and the importance of each specific department. So the point I want to make, though, is that I really got a chance to analyze margins, data, and different industries. Because in the commercial insurance industry, you could deal with, let's say a physician's office one day, but at the same time, the next minute, you could deal with a manufacturing company. So one thing I want to point out is the industry that you're in. Sometimes you have to look at margins different. For example, a big health and hospital system like Advocate, they may have margins of 4%, or 4% of billions of dollars, versus margins of 80%, of let's say 5 million is totally different. So when you take a look at qualifying the idea, I think you start at a basic need, but then you start to scale up and you start to look at margins and the output that you're putting in, and sometimes it's specific to industries. And I looked at competitors too. I wanted to know what were they doing, what were they generating, and how did they go about doing it. So it could be as basic as saying, hey, they have this many employees and this much revenue. Create an equation that says, hey, based on each individual, this is the revenue that person is generating, whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of different ways, but I started from a really basic level.
All right, Emil, if you could give us a little bit of insight, because Emil has multiple locations at this point, but it all started with that first one. So when you're looking at build out of a location and raising money and all that stuff, how did you take into consideration your basic survival needs and how that was going to get in? And how did your projections match what actually happened in reality?
So I'm still trying to survive. Just make that clear. But jokes aside, I think we're a nonprofit organization, so our whole revenue structure is completely different. So I chose to analyze the expense side of things, make sure I can keep my costs as low as possible. So some folks might think I'm cheap, and what we think of kind of our centers and we didn't necessarily want to have all the crazy bells and whistles from the beginning, right? Because once again, we wanted to make sure we had demand to make up for the fact that did you need all those bells and whistles? So once again, we're in the technology incubator space, innovation center space, and that's a really expensive space to be in because computers are expensive, TV monitors are expensive, people are expensive. So what I tried to do is limit my cost as much as possible and be very cognizant of that. The biggest expense is the real estate itself. So the good thing about me focusing in the communities is that real estate is a little cheaper than being downtown River North. So my runway was a lot longer. So my goal really with the first location was to make a pilot of it all. In the sense where how do we do community economic development with technology development, fuse it together, make it exciting, make it fun, and figure out how we can replicate that in other areas. Because for me, from a mission standpoint, if we just work with one center or X amount of people on a given day, and we're not trying to scale this thing, then to me, I'm not doing my job and I could be doing something else. So once again, I'm about trying to change the narrative, and to change the narrative, you need volume of people, you need scale, you need, so what we've been able to do in just the 2 years we've kind of been live with this kind of mission, we've been able to say, okay, now that we've kind of figured out the business model side of things, we've been able to activate supply and demand together, because once again, it's a chicken and egg problem. How do you get people in a room? They gotta know that they're gonna get some value, but at the same time, how do you show them that you're gonna have value? So it's a challenging proposition, so we focused on one thing at a time, and that was part of our price perspective, but also making sure we limit our costs. So we're kind of the Southwest Airlines of coworkers, basically. It's kind of what I look at. So there's no peanuts, there's no chicken and vegetables or anything like that. But ultimately, because of that, we're able to translate that now to data that we can actually use to better understand for locations, identifying those locations, what's the maximum price point we're willing to pay, and also to see how many people that we need to have go through that space on a daily, monthly, annual basis to make up for the expenses that we have to provide that particular service. So being a nonprofit is a different proposition, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to everybody. But what I will say is that you can really learn a lot about your business by really controlling your costs and seeing how you can take those costs and those expenses and translate that into meaningful data that you can present either grants, for grants, foundations, people to donate, or just to tell great stories of what's possible.
Thank you, Bill. That was definitely a different perspective. We've seen 4 unique perspectives based on the businesses these individuals are in, and I'm going to give you a 5th. And in my perspective, it's been a process over the last couple of years. I launched Candid a couple of years ago, and for me, the projections I had, looking back on it now, were ridiculous. Just like that watch for y'all. Ridiculous. And the reason why is because what I didn't realize was how hard it is to literally create a new category, to create space in a human being's mind for some new concept that doesn't exist. Microfeedback doesn't exist. So to take something new and assume that you're going to be able to get it out, shift people's behavior, and get to the money quickly is very tough. To figure out your customer invitation process on something that you haven't done before, it takes some time to figure out who's the person on the other side of the table that actually is going to cut a check for this thing that I'm trying to get them to look at. How many of those people do I have to get to before I can get to one presentation? How many presentations do I have to make before I can get to one contract? How many contracts do I have to get before some actual money goes in the bank? What are the terms of that contract? Once they sign, is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Do I get 20% of the money up front? And then, 75% at the end of the contract? All these things I had assumptions about, but my assumptions were grossly inaccurate, and it took me a long time to get back out in front of it. And I'm just now at the point with my business in the last 3 to 6 months, we really got our legs under us. We know how to get to the right people quickly. I know what the narratives are. I know what the presentation looks like. I can start to track, measure, and quantify everything about it, but until you have a process, there's nothing to track, measure, and quantify. So this business has helped me to, from a qualifying my personal aim standpoint, I think in singular ways. Who's the one person I need to talk to? Not some invisible customer hanging out somewhere, not a business. There's a person in that business sitting at a desk who's got to cut me a check. And if I can't articulate a way to get to them, then I'm probably not going to get to them, probably not going to get a contract. So that's how I look at my chief aims now around finances and getting a contract and things like that when I'm starting a business. And they were a little bit more kind of high-minded and assumptive when I started, but now it's really, really ground up. So that's kind of how, for me, the chief aims conversation comes in. I keep everything very, very conservative. Even if in my brain it looks like it's getting ready to be that hockey stick projection, like up like that, I keep everything very, very conservative. So that's my viewpoint. So we'll go to step 2 real quick. And step 2 is focus, defining your ideal customer. So I want to, whoever wants to jump on that first, I want to just frame it for you. Have you ever asked somebody who their ideal customer is, and they say, oh, everybody. Have you guys ever heard anybody say that? Like, you probably don't want to raise your hand if you're that person. If you say that, I want you to know that there's somebody on the opposite of you saying, I don't have any idea what they're doing. No idea. Nobody's necessarily telling you that. It may just pat you on the back, go get them. But guess what? If your customer is everybody, your customer is nobody. Because you don't have any specific narrative that creates a box for your ideal person to say, oh, they described me perfectly. I want to jump in that box. And you also don't have a narrative that has everybody who's not your customer say, that box is not for me, I'm not going to make a call, I'm not going to send an email, I'm not going to waste my time or theirs. The best invitation is the one that tells everybody who's not your customer to stay away. So I want to ask you guys, how did you define your ideal customer starting out? Or did you do a good job defining your ideal customer? Because when it gets back around to me, I'll tell you once again.
God, actually it's so weird. I was listening to that. Our market is so big. How many of y'all have a smartphone? Everybody. Basically, you all are all my customers. If you go to BreakingVoices.com and go to the bottom of our app and click subscribe, once you give me one key piece of information I need, which is the zip code, I can now serve each one of you all relevant-based news based on the zip codes that matter most to you. So if you give me one, I can give you relevance to that zip. I can give you surrounding zip codes to where you live. You give me up to 5, then I can really start serving you all different relevant news that matters. But it's not just the people that are in this room, it's your neighbors, because if we share a story to you via text message or you follow it on Facebook and you get a hold of our link, our technology, it will opt you in without your permission. And when I say without your permission, what it is traditional newspapers have always thought about that box that you had to go up, put your quarter in. In our system, any interaction with our system will serve an ad placement. So if any of you all are watching this live stream at home, you probably saw Freshie, you probably saw Allstate, you probably saw whomever the person that was bidding for your eyeball. We look at every zip code, every latitude, longitude, anywhere in the world, and we can monetize that eyeball. So for us, it is more about what is our method for getting to the end user. So because we're tracking all your devices, and when I say tracking, not like freaky, weird, privacy intrusion, all legal above, and we have patents on these methods, we can actually say, you come here this often, you read this kind of news, you bounce off of this kind of news, now let's recommend another story for the next time you come.
If you bring it back to the beginning though, so
literally
I'm saying,
from the very beginning.
how did you, so in some way, shape, or form, for you to get to somebody, you gotta say, this group, or this, this corner, because I've seen you out on the corner with that, Elbert gets out and hustles, have his sign.
I have a sign back there.
So what I'm saying is, and I want to make sure we respect the time, we come back, but, either Jeff or Charles, speak to also in the beginning too, before it was operating, before you had that clarity, how did you get to it? And if you didn't have it, what were the consequences of it?
Just a quick on that. Actually, if I really go back and I think about where the idea started, so I was an adjunct at DePaul, and actually I did test all of these ideas, features, and everything on all of my students. The 1 year that I was like really teaching the class, and it was about 150 students, and library time, everything, and we went from 100 features down to 5. So I do think about, we were going after millennials, we just didn't know like where it would lead us. So I would definitely say millennials, 18 to 43 will be our demographic, because only 5% of millennials have chosen a news provider that they want worldwide. Only 5. So it's a $480 billion market.
Gotcha.
So I wish I was as succinct and as smart out the gate as Albert was. I got out the gate and I was like, man, who needs a website? I'm gonna build it. That was a mistake. We were building, when we started the first year, man, we built websites for family reunions. My cousin needs a site for her flower shop. I mean, I was sitting down with people, they were like, I got this idea for a hair care line, and they had no line. And I'm like, well, I'll build your site. And we did that, and that was a mistake. We learned very quickly that every client is not the right client for our business, and especially the way we do things. We are not the onesie, twosie development shop. We have a full process. You come in, I have a project manager. We use Basecamp. We have a 4-phase development cycle that you go through, from design, deployment, develop, and then maintenance after the site's built. We have process. And I realized that, the Ma and Pa, family reunion, there are people out there, they go to Squarespace, they go to Wix, they go to any of those to build their site. That's not what we do. We're starting, we talk about doing, REST API, we can connect other systems, we can do all these advanced things. And so I learned within the first year that every client and every check wasn't good. Even big checks. I got a story about that. Guy called out of Atlanta. City of Atlanta was looking to build a website, big site through their transit department, the Marlin. He said, well, we got $150,000 for you all. We need a black development firm. We really want to work with you. So he sent over the specs, and I answered the RFP, and we got the bid. I actually had to recuse myself from that bid because when I looked at what they wanted, and I actually did the research again after the fact, this is year 1 out the gate, I realized that was $1 million plus project. And they actually, the full value of the RFP was $3.5 million. The guy who was administrating the RFP basically was a subcontractor, cut me out for $150K. So I had, called him and said, hey man, this for what we're doing, this is way undervalued. And we stepped into the project. So I learned in that now, and now we do full assessments on everything. We know, I know the number, the value, I know what we bring. And yeah, so I learned the hard way early, and was able to, cut off the water flow and make sure that we do things the right way.
So a couple of things happened for me, and I want to take a quick step back just to talk a little bit about how we got into the tech industry. So I talked a little bit about the commercial insurance industry. So I have a commercial insurance brokerage where we do group employee benefits. I started with industry though. When you talk about healthcare, the United States spends the most on healthcare in the world. We're talking about 18% of every dollar of gross domestic product go towards healthcare. So it was a big industry. That's where I started. Second was, I wanted to know who was providing healthcare for most of the people in the United States. And I found out that employers are providing healthcare to all of their workers. Why? So I had to figure out the why. Why would they provide healthcare? It's a competitive landscape to say, hey, we're going to pay you the most money, we're going to give you the best benefits, the best vacation. Healthcare is probably third in that equation, so it's a big deal. Once I got there, we did pretty well with our commercial insurance brokerage. But then I found out on the healthcare side, all of my clients came to me and said, hey, we're paying way too much for healthcare. And you've heard about the Affordable Care Act and the problems that we've had. So I started to think, they said, hey, on our budget, healthcare is top 5, what we're paying. And if this is consistent, it doesn't matter if you're a 10 life company or a Fortune 500 company, this is pretty consistent. I said there has to be a solution to help bring down healthcare costs. That's how we got into the wellness space. I was very strategic. I already had clients, and I was already in the insurance industry. So I started to look up minority-owned wellness companies. And we're the only certified minority wellness company in Illinois. So I said, something's interesting here. So once I decided that, and I found out the statistics around wellness, it's a $3.4 billion industry. It's a crazy industry, growing like crazy. Once I figured that out, I said, okay, how am I going to get in this industry? And what clients am I going to serve? I knew I already had clients, but it goes down another level. The specific needs of the employees within those companies. What are those specific needs? Because it's not only healthcare, disability, it's dealing with life insurance. Healthcare is number 1, but I wanted to figure out, okay, if I'm going to be serving these employees, what are their particular issues? So I said, it has to be bigger than just serving these clients and helping decrease the premiums and stuff like that. I said, okay, so we're going to have to decrease health disparities. And the last part was, we need to integrate data. The goal of our company, besides, we have an online platform, we have trainers, nutrition, and stuff like that, is to integrate data. There's not a company out there right now that's looking at real data. And I'll tell you what real data is. I'll wrap up 2 times. So on our online wellness platform, we have to take a health risk assessment. The health risk assessment is self-reported. 50 questions, talks about your health. What that means is if you feel good one day, you may answer the questions differently, right? If you don't feel good one day, it's a different answer. And so that's not real data. The other set of data that we hope to integrate is real medical data. When you go to the doctor, they're tracking the data. You can't run from it. But on the insurance side, you have the medical data, disability data, and workers' compensation data. We want to integrate the real data with what I call the gray area data and come up with customized solutions around it. That's what we're working on right now. That's our solution. But I started with industry, clients, employees, and I just went down the line to figure out, hey, who do I need to serve?
So that's really good, because again, Charles, the theme here is Charles seems to be ahead of the game. But one of the reasons why is because he already had an in to a very specific problem with a client who he was already serving, that was already paying him, who he's already getting data from. It's a great head start. That's called specialized knowledge. We have specialized knowledge about something, it shortcuts the process.
I think I know for myself, the starting point was I was a college professor at North Park University, so that helped get me through the tough times in the beginning. And also gave me the flexibility to allow me to figure out exactly what my mission was. And for me, I wanted to focus on the youth, because I ultimately saw what happens if we have an AAU of youth going on in technology, and we had a chance to be the first people as a part of that. Because when talking to adults at the time, to say co-working space, they're like, what? I get what for the money? Wait, what? So it was so many different conversations around that, and I saw that it's frustrating. So I started to realize a couple of things. One, it's okay to fire your customers. There's customers that we're a social organization, but we can't help everybody. Because the way our model works and how we diversify our revenue, we have a lot of events, workshops, things just like this. But there's folks that want to have events and they want the James Bond treatment, and we don't have James Bond prices. So go downtown River North if you want to have that. So those are some of the different things that we had to figure out to see exactly what made the most sense, what was the best return on investment, especially operationally with the fact that I'm trying to reduce costs at every step along the way and try to be able to manage all that. So our second customer is kind of our community partnerships and organizations we're working with. A big part of what our scale is to work with organizations that are already ingrained in the community. So we focus on what we focus on, and the organization is responsible for making sure the community is aware and galvanized around this technology development. So once again, it's an opportunity where at first we were taking everybody who said, hey, they wanted to have an incubator in their location, their area. And then after a while we said, no, not everybody. Because once again, there's some organizations that allow you to do what you do best, and some organizations that don't allow you to do what you do best. So if I'm going to spend 10 times working on your organization with you and all the bureaucracy around the nonprofit world, it's not worth my time. And so ultimately what I've been able to see is that there's a framework of the type of organization I'm willing to work with, which is the best use of my time, the best people that I'm working with on that other side of things, to make sure that this is a smooth relationship and realize that let me do what I do best, let you do what you do best, and allow us to serve the community in the best, most effective way.
Thank you. For me, again, the thing is going to be assumptions that were invalid. So I started out, when I looked at Candid, I thought I was being really smart about it. Because when I looked out into the world of feedback and assessment, it was just wide open, right? You know, there's literally, if you go to any restaurant for the most part, there's no way that you can have some great service or some poor service, and it will leave feedback, take out your phone, leave feedback about that later, in that moment, and they get it, their boss gets it, regional gets it, corporate gets it, all inside one mobile dashboard with literally every port, every plate, and every guest interaction across the nation. In real time, you know what your business health is at all times. It doesn't exist. And so I said to myself, man, this is a wide open playing field. The first person to lay this railroad is going to be super, super rich. And this, who doesn't see this is common sense. So when I go to restaurants, of course they're going to buy this. I mean, why wouldn't they? And so I went out and I built all this software. And it was beautiful. It did what I wanted it to do for the most part. You know, after we got past all the bugs and the humps. And then I went to restaurant groups, and they're like, man, you know, I don't think that's going to work for it. Well, what do you mean? How do you get feedback now? Well, Yelp, and well, what about, you don't want all that public stuff, because once they yelped about you, it's actually too late, it's not good. If you could just get private feedback, and it would take them a second, then would this work for you? Well, you know, our customers, we kind of know our customers. We know our regulators, and I'm thinking, don't you know most human beings are non-confrontational? They're not going to tell you when they have a problem. They're going to leave and never come back. But I had all of these assumptions about who was going to be my customer and what was going to work and what wasn't. And I still have to close the restaurant group. It's been 2 years. But what I did have was associations and conferences on a national level. Hey, we heard about your software. We'd love to use this at our national conference. The Illinois Education Association, they're the largest in the state. They called us very early on, and you know, we closed the contract in less than 48 hours from the time we logged in. And so I'm like, okay, well, I guess we'll go ahead and do this business. This isn't really who we after. Restaurant groups are a thing. And so I got that contract, we did it, and they're raving about it, and you know, got an advocate, and we moved on to the next presentations, and we went after more restaurant groups. And a little while later, hey, International Facilities Management Association, largest in the world. We'd love to use your software. All right, great. I guess we'll go ahead and do your conference too. But I'm really focused on restaurant groups. Is my focus on restaurant groups gonna, like, is this a distraction for me to do this conference where people pay me money versus focusing on restaurant groups? And at some point in time, it might have been 9 months in when I kept doing these conferences, where I thought to myself, you fools, people trying to pay you to use software. And so those engagements, they were one-offs, they were kind of, 2 or 3 day conferences, but we were able to charge $3,500, $5,000 for a 1 or 2, 3 day conference. For me, it was low-hanging fruit, because my goal is this with Candid. I want to do 300 locations at, this subscription dollar amount per month. So it looked like it wasn't going to be a good investment of my time. But after I really started to notice who was paying me, then I built my business model around that. So now, We approach associations in the restaurant group space, in the transit space, or industries that we're looking after, and we do what we call an official feedback partnership, where at times we'll do a discounted fee to lay out our software and put do a mobile comment box for their conference. So now we solve the problem for them because they're paying 25, 30 grand per speaker. And they'll have 15, 20 speakers for these breakout sessions at their conferences. And 500,000 people leave every session and they don't know what they thought about the speaker. So what we can do is in 60 seconds at the end of that session, the moderator just says, all right guys, thanks so much for coming out. Do us a favor, take out your phone. You got the little mobile comment cards, right? Everybody got one of those? Go to the mobile C box that's on your card, input this little 8-digit code you see on the screen. We're gonna take 60 seconds, let us know what you thought about the speaker. And 1 minute later, they have 300, 400, 500 comments letting them know how that speaker did, whether they should invite them back next year. And it solves a real problem for them. And it also allows me, if it's an industry event, because every executive in a particular industry goes to their association events. So now I can get 500 CEOs of a particular type of business in the room all at one time, and when they pull out their phone and go to that micro survey, they're getting a live demo of my product that I'm getting paid to give them, but I never would have saw the opportunity for that business model had I been stuck on it looking a certain way. So for me, I'm clear about what my customer was, I'm clear about what my customer is, but I wasn't clear about whether or not my assumptions were accurate, and also how to leverage getting in front of them with a little bit more speed, a little bit more width and depth, doing it smart. So that's kind of how I approach it. Hopefully that, it'll flip some things along in your head about how to approach your customers a lot of different ways once you get it focused in. So the next thing we're going to talk about is, I kind of bridged into that a little bit, is amplify. Step 3, define centers of influence. So there's a way that you can go about your business where you approach one person at a time and you talk to one customer at a time, and you basically try to pitch them, versus identifying who are the people that either are in associations, conferences, organizations, businesses, whatever, that serve a whole bunch of your particular customer. And if you get them to buy into your product, either as a customer or as an advisor or something like that, they've already got the trust of 500, 1,000 people. And when they say jump, that whole group is going to say how high. And so that's a way that I've learned or been taught to now look at business development. So I want to ask you guys, when you started your business, back to the beginning, pull back the red curtain a little bit. Did you look at your business from that framework of getting one big customer that can open up the doors to a whole bunch, or did you go after one at a time? What were the consequences if you did the one at a time?
I can start off with that. So when I first started on the commercial insurance side, I had a mentor, and my mentor had a really large home. And I said, I'm about to be rich. My mentor is going to give me his business. It won't be a problem. This is the only client I need. And I thought it was great, but when I spoke to my mentor about it, for one, he didn't think I was ready. I was just starting. But number two, he was too big for me. He was literally too big for me. So it was an opportunity that I wish I had, but I couldn't get it because I needed to grow my business and grow my company. So I started to focus on where I can actually find the types of clients that I needed. So I knew I needed to scale down. So my ideal client, and that's another important thing, identifying the ideal client. So my ideal client, for one, has to be a decision maker, has to have a company, has to have a number of employees as well. So once I define those things, I said, where do I find 500 of my ideal client? That's how I approach it. So I started to look at, where do these people hang? Is there like some social club for CEOs? Are they at events? Whatever the case may be. And what I found out is that most of these CEOs, especially in a city like Chicago, we thrive on philanthropy and things like that. So there's a lot of nonprofits and people like to give back to the community. And I found out this is a place where a lot of these CEOs congregate and spend their time. But I had to take it a step further. The next step was, okay, I found hundreds of events to go to every year. And if you go to every event, you're going to be spending money at every event. So I had to be a little more calculated and find out, okay, these 20 CEOs, where do they go? Can I catch them all at one event?
You knew them by name? Like you knew?
I literally listed the people that I need. I'm like a corporate stalker. I will fully admit that I just literally stalk people. I want to know where they will be, who they hang with, what boards they're on. I mean, I literally do research to find my clients and my targets. And I literally target CEOs and I find them. And it's been one of the things that's helped me the most is that I actually have a plan on how I want to approach these CEOs, what their companies do, and things of that nature. But on a very basic level, that's where I started, trying to figure out who has the decision and power to say yes to me, where I can start to grow my business.
Yeah, kind of similar. Like we literally targeted organizations. So my first major client was the Cook County Bar Association, which is the oldest black bar association in the country. They have like 700 lawyer, judge, judicial members, and student members here in Chicago. So we went after them, got the contract, gave them an across-the-board discount on development services, which led us to do another 15 legal websites in Chicago. Did the same thing with the Black Women Lawyers Association last year, the Georgia Association of Black Women Attorneys. So we targeted organizations. After that, again, kind of expanding out the scope, utilizing the network that I had. I'm very fortunate to have some people and friends, some in the room that have referred some very good clients to us that were kind of our focal or feature clients. So, you know, Erica Campbell from Mary and Floyd Mayweather and Common were all referrals to us from a larger mentor company that had gotten to the point where they weren't doing the athlete entertainer bill anymore. So they would kick those right to us, and we would always make sure that we did an excellent job to move on and get more referrals from those clients. It's much easier when you have large organizations and people that have reputable, great reputations behind to get those clients. When you can say, oh, I did the development for Floyd or these individuals that people know. It made it much easier for us to go into the next client and pitch and sell.
Yeah. So interestingly, when we first started, a lot of people thought we were fools, right? They said they got this 1871 thing that's out here. The backed by billionaires, like, what are you doing? So there's even an op-ed that came out of Cranes like the next day that we were coming out and said, these guys are fools, pretty much. So the interesting thing from taking that on is we started to say, you know what, we got to focus on that 20%. So they talk about that 80-20 rule, that 20% of your customer base, if you serve them really well, you do right by them, then that will help amplify everything that you have to do. And that's really what we do. In terms of our staff and everybody that works with us, we really are embedded with the folks that are there every single day. So if you're working on something and you have a problem with your AngularJS, we got somebody right there who can work with you on that. Everybody on our staff can code. That was a phenomenal thing. So once again, we were able to say, you know what, we'll work with you. It's good stories. We use the heck out of social media so people can see people that are untraditional in the tech kind of archetypes actually doing amazing things. And from there, that allowed us to really start telling those success stories. So I think the first thing we did is making sure we had a pretty good product for the folks that we were serving, and found a way to be able to tell those stories in very bite-sized ways. So if you ever see our Twitter accounts or our Facebook account, we have a very intentional way, and we track every single post that we do in terms of what time we do it, in terms of what the message is, make sure we don't have too many youth in 1 week or not too many adults in 1 week on the page itself. So we use those things because they're cheap, because once again, I'm cheap. And we found those are ways to amplify so that once again, we can start having the big partnerships to give us the validity that we needed to make sure that folks realize, hey, they are doing good work there. And I think the good thing about our social mission is everybody who spends time with us, the one thing they always say is like, we really care a lot. We're really passionate about what we do. So therefore, it made it easier for folks to refer us to people that were bigger and better, and folks with resources that allowed us to really start getting another level. So when we got national press before we got local press. So it was one of those things where we were able to push things out in so many different ways. So now, when we're going to other cities, everybody is begging us to be there. I get more cities that want us to be there than we have people on staff right now, which is a good problem to have. So now we're starting to say, how do we take this good model that we've started to develop, and how do we scale in a very efficient way so we don't dilute what is the core values of what our organization is founded upon. So we're very mission driven, but at the same time, we still have a for-profit way about how we're trying to expand and have the kind of scale to change the narrative of what technology development looks like.
So, Albert, speak a little bit to, when you started, because you're a very independent guy. I know you know everybody in the city, literally. How did you leverage the people who you know in a very strategic way to build? Because you took your time building it out.
So I'm sitting here and I'm listening, and you talk about founder stories. You know, it's a great founder story. So this is my fourth tech company. I've been doing this since I was 16 years old, so I don't know anything else. I've never worked for a corporation. I don't know that life. So it's weird, I'm sitting here and I think to myself, when I was working on Groupon and that whole concept, what we really saw was that if someone becomes the brand leader in a completely new market that no one else controls, then you can literally leapfrog worldwide. You don't need at all connections to people because the broadband is your connection. Me and my co-founder, we won a hackathon for Comcast, and now we are consulting for Comcast nationwide. Because what they saw and what we had was more knowledge and expertise and domain expertise than their $26 billion corporation has. Now they're going to ask us what we do. So I guess when it comes to creating disruptive models, for me it was keeping the idea as pure as possible. And that was thinking forward beyond what other people were thinking about. Because no one would ever think that iReport would fail, that every block another competitor would get bought out and now resold 4 other times to someone else. And we just sat back and we were like, we're gonna wait until this all falls down. And that's exactly what's happening at the Sun Times and all these other companies. So for me, it's literally been the way that I approach every person. I know Thomas knows me in this sense. I evaluate every person based on 4 things, 4 types of people, 4 kinds of people. Are you a follower, an influencer, decision maker, or power holder? So depending on how you interact with me and I interact with you, I will adjust based on those things. And then I will dive into something that I call APCOM, acceptance, purpose, probing, consulting, overcoming objectives, motivating to act. And then I will analyze how the conversation needs to go in real time. Because our whole model, no one else is doing. The closest thing's about a News Corp, and they're like, $16 billion company. But that's how we look at it. I never, I knew that, good example. On this exact same stage last week, Marco Rubio was here. We got an amazing interview with Marco Rubio, amazing, but no other millennial news network was here besides all these long, big, old cameras in the back. And we outbeat them by the next day. We got it done in I think about an hour. So people were watching something that they would normally have to wait 24 to 48 hours to watch. We already had it out, and so now people are coming to us like Comcast or NPR or Yahoo, and we're just like, let's see what you're about. But we own our technology.
So a real independent guy. So for me, the only way I approach business, period, is by finding people who are centers of influence and looking to leverage those relationships. I don't spend money on traditional advertising ever. It's all about leveraging relationship. Because when you're selling, especially if you're selling an enterprise product, there's no other way to lose. If people, you may have people tell you otherwise that